Monday, the 6th of November 2023. Welcome to the Roscoe Palm Show. Today, you won't believe how bad the Cape's water and food security is. We've got SUSANNA Coleman and NAZEER Sondaay to tell us more. Elsewhere, Democratic Alliance drama. Tertius Simmers caught double dipping with his housing allowance, while DA councillor Abdul Kader Elias pretends to be a doctor. Like that Matthew Lani guy. We'll talk more about that soon. Abroad, diplomatic relations sour between Israel and everybody, including South Africa. Casualties in Gaza top 10,000 people, including thousands of children. And finally, prepare for Donald Trump to take back the White House as polls show Biden losing bigly in a matchup. Welcome to the show. It's been 2 weeks off. Nantel, how have you been, bro?
I'm cool. Next time when you say bigly, you need to use
bigly.
You need to.
Yeah, I'm perfecting my Donald Trump impersonation. It's gonna come. I'm still working on it. Like we were doing this the thing. Imagine if Donald Trump was still the president, and if the Gaza Palestine situation had been happening, he would have been doing exactly the same things that Joe Biden is doing, but it would have been so many babies beheaded, walking around, no heads, beautiful babies. So I'm still working on that character, but nobody can top Donald Trump. As we speak, he's in court right now. If you can catch live things, the judge is warning him that she will throw him out of court. Like right now, as we speak, unfortunately it's not televised, but the Trump show continues. Meanwhile, let's talk about this thing with Tertius Simmers. So Tertius Simmers. He was caught double dipping. He has the ministerial handbook of the Western Cape Legislature states that once a member of the Executive Council buys a house within 50-kilometer radius of the Western Cape Legislature and has it registered in the name, it disqualifies them from a housing allowance benefit. But Tertius Simmers has not one, not two, but three properties. The taxpayer is paying Tertius Simmers rent in the northern suburbs in Century City, while he's collecting rent from his other properties. So, we can't say that the reason why we're only hearing about this now is not because the opposition are so good at what they're doing. It's because the DA are having their elective conference on Saturday. So they are dishing dirt on everybody. It's like it's knives out now. But it seems that this has come from Bonginkosi Madikizela's camp, who is also vying against Tertius Simmers for a leadership position. Now, Bonginkosi Madikizela was kicked out or rather removed from a position in the DA because he faked his qualifications, which brings us to the DA's Dr. Matthew Lani. This guy. It's unbelievable what this dude, Abdul Kader Elias, is under investigation for allegedly lying about having a medical qualification. No different to Matthew Lani. He has the one damning thing about this is that he used this lie to pitch up at a party selection panel in 2021 wearing scrubs, claiming to have just come from a hospital call. Now imagine like if you go to a job interview and you say like, oh, I'm sorry I'm late. I had to just help those kids. I had to do 3 liver transplants and do chemo for this other kid. That's why I'm so late. I'm such a good guy, So this guy serves on the leadership of the Metro in the DA. And the only thing, there's nothing more effective at bringing down DA politicians than other DA politicians. This stuff came after the DA Metro elective conference. So it's dog eat dog. It's like throwing raw meat into a pit of hungry wolves when it comes to the DA and their fight for leadership positions. So the DA, there's that guy, Abdul Kader with his friend John Steenhuisen. They're having their provincial elective conference this week. Also this week, the Good Party are having their first elective conference. I was going to go to the DA elective conference, but then I remembered I'm not a loser. So I'm going to go to the DA elective conference and just sort of see what's happening there. But that doesn't mean that we're not open to having DA councillors and DA MPs and DA MECs on the show.
Like we did in the past.
Like we have in the past, open invitation. That's an adversarial space, so you're going to face some hard questions. But if you are brave, like Angus McKenzie was brave, he came, he sat opposite me, we talked about EPWP, then the seat is open, so you're welcome. Right, enough of that. Let's talk to NAZEER Sondaay and SUSANNA Coleman. I've been wanting to have this discussion for a very long time. So welcome to the show. Thank you for making the time to come through.
It's great to be here, Roscoe.
How are you doing, SUSANNA?
Thank you, Roscoe. Happy to be here.
Good. So most people don't know about that. They think about the PHA or the Phillippi Horticultural Area as some kind of almost a theoretical thing. But people don't know that a significant supply of our food in Cape Town and the Western Cape comes from this place in Phillippi. How much of our supply chain is dependent on the PHA?
Yeah, well, this is a topic of my presentation to people all the time. Like, do you know where your food comes from? And why is it important to know this? Because, what happens on the farms directly impacts on your plate, wherever you are in the city. Because the food from the Phillippi Horticultural Area and the farming community, they produce over 200,000 tons of vegetables per year, right? And 60% of these vegetables are going into the informal economy, going through all the working class and poor communities on the Cape Flats, fire hawkers,
The stalls on the side of the road,
bucket
fruit
traders,
and veg,
all of those the people who sell vegetables, and 40% goes into the supermarket supply chain, right? And so there you will find carrots from the PHA in Pick n Pay, in Shoprite, in Checkers, in fruit and veg, in Spar, etc. Right? So it's a big chunk of vegetables. It's estimated that it's about 40% of the food, of the vegetables consumed in the city comes from the PHA, right? So it's quite a significant, but it's more than just the vegetables. We also have flour producers in our area, and we have livestock traders in our area. Like, for example, over Ramadan, when we have the Muslim cultural event, the Islamic event, where people are slaughtering animals, for charity and so on. About 10,000 head of animals get sold out of the PHA in that period. And there was just a figure over like 4 years ago. So that has probably increased now. So even that too, so when people buy livestock, like the Shishinyamas, when they make food on the side of the road, they get their livestock from our area, So our area is very central to the city's food system. Right? If the area would disappear, right, then, we'll be in big problems.
We will come to the area disappearing. But SUSANNA, can you tell me how you became involved in the PHA campaign and just in general who you are?
I'm an optometrist by trade, and I volunteered for the PHA campaign in 2014. That was a function of realizing that the reason why Jacob Zuma was in charge was my fault.
It wasn't only a lot
not
of people.
only my fault,
Yeah.
but most of the activists in their 20s in 1994, we were active, and then we went off and we lived our nice middle class lives. And the ANC ended up running the country the way they were running it, because we weren't participating in democracy anymore. So it was a choice of whether to go and join an ANC branch or otherwise join a very specific cause, which was saving the farmlands from developers. And I opted for the latter because if you focus on one issue, you're much more likely to succeed. And here we are, nearly 10 years later, I'm still a volunteer with the PHA campaign.
Right. So, SUSANNA, I'm going to stay with you. Now, in 2014, you joined the PHA campaign. NAZEER, you said that 40%, up to 40% of our fresh produce comes from the PHA. And it's part of the economy of the local economy. Now, the PHA is under threat. What are those things that are threatening the PHA as the farmland of the PHA?
Well, the farmland of the PHA is the last unpaved rural landscape left in the city, in the Cape Flats. There are only 3 green lungs left. There's a big green area around the airport. There's the mountain, and there's the 3,000 hectares of the Phillippi Horticultural Area. And what happened in 2008 was that a developer decided to buy up a number of farms and put in an application for a development. They wanted to put up to 40,000 houses, a private prison, a private school, a light industrial area, basically an area 10 times the size of Century City on top of the farmlands. And so the City of Cape Town did an evaluation on that application, and the full City of Cape Town turned down that application in 2009. Now, when I met Nazeer in 2014, he was basically saying, how on earth is that development, which was turned down, going ahead? And how come there are a whole lot more developments going ahead? And it turned out that the DA at the time, Patricia de Lille was the mayor, had decided that it was a good idea to pave over the farmlands. One of the main reasons is that rural farmland is worth 250,000 a hectare. And if you change that to urban land and develop it, put houses on top of it, it can go to between 1.5 and 2.5 million per hectare. So there's a huge difference in land price. And if you put 40,000 houses on it, then you have 40,000 houses paying rates to the City of Cape Town. And they feel that that's much more valuable than feeding its citizens, because you can always import cabbage in a tin from China, can't you?
Yes. And of course, there are other farmers who would benefit from the PHA no longer being viable agricultural land. So let's talk about the viability of the DA's plan, or rather, now there are many actors besides the Democratic Alliance and besides the City of Cape Town. I recall in 2016, when I became aware of this issue, or 2015, there was a move by Anton Bradell, who is the MEC for Environmental Affairs and Local Government, which are things that are strange. It's a strange portfolio to have.
Well, it's actually in environmental affairs and development planning.
And development
He's
planning.
the minister who plans ahead what areas need to be developed.
Right. And also environmental affairs.
And he's the minister of environment.
Yes. So it just gives away the game that those are his portfolios. Now, in 2015, there was a move to, and you need to refresh my memory, to move the urban edge. Was that specifically to change the valuation of the property so that it could then be sold on to developers? And what happened and subsequent to that?
Yeah. Well, you see, when a developer wants to develop on rural land, right, they have to jump through a few hoops, permission hoops. So one would be to shift the urban edge, right, to allow for the development. In other words, just take over more of the farmland into the urban area. It's an arbitrary line. It could be a road. It could be just a pencil on a map to shift. So that's the one thing. And then the other thing would be that the developer need to undergo an environmental impact assessment. And that is done by the provincial government. And development will need to go do a rezone of the land, which is a city competency. The city must decide on that. And in some cases, there's also a heritage level permission that need to be gotten, right? And then and in terms of agricultural land, there's also the matter of getting the national minister's permission to subdivide agricultural land for other purposes. So there's like few hoops that developers have to undergo. Now, when SUSANNA said that in 2008 the developer bought some land from farmers.
We can name them, by the way, if you come.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's the PHA is kind of a macrocosm of the land situation in South Africa, where you have 70-80% of the land owned by white farmers, right? And they then 80% of those farmers are actually not farming, right? They're just landowners, right? For example, one piece of land in the Oaklands development belongs to a professor of journalism at Stellenbosch University.
He's not a farmer.
She's not a farmer. She's a landowner, right? So there's a difference between, when people talk about agricultural land, they assume all the land is farmed, right? But in our country, 80% of the food is produced by a handful of farmers, right? But only at 20% of that handful of farmers, which is about 36 to 40,000 commercial farmers, are actually producing 80% of the food, which means that 80% of the land that these so-called farmers hold, they're just landlords of this land. And so this is the case in the PHA, where the fallow land that was held by absentee landlords stroke farmers then sold land to the developer, see? And so the developer had to approach the city of Cape Town to move the urban edge as a first step. In 2009, the council sat on this and said, no, we will not approve the urban edge because the study that we commissioned, your and my tax money, to understand the implications of this urban edge shift and the development on there, recommended in 2009 not to shift the urban edge because the area was very important for water, for food, and for jobs and for land reform. And based on that, the council said no, they're not going to shift the urban edge, and the matter died.
Right. Only to be revived again.
And then suddenly it was revived in 2012 when Mr. Bradell, our MSc for Environment and Development Planning, and the then Mayor Dan Plato met in a room, in a dark room, I might say, with no eyes in the room, and shifted the urban edge without letting anybody know about it. So when SUSANNA came on the scene, we thought that battle was won. We now only have to deal with the other development, the UVS development, 212 hectare UVS development, right? So these are the kind of things that happen. So yes, so there's a lot of pressure on land in the PHA for development because, as SUSANNA said, the incentive to make mega billions is high, where you get agricultural land for cheap. Remember, agricultural land doesn't have the services. It doesn't have roads. It doesn't have public transport. It doesn't have infrastructure like stormwater, sewage. So all the developer is buying is buying what they call greenfields land, right? Land that's not been developed before. And guess who pays for those infrastructure? You and I pay through our taxes, and the city puts those infrastructure in place. And the developer then runs all the way to the bank with billions. So that's just a bit of a sketch of the environment in which we are, in which we are operating in trying to protect the farming area.
So, yes, SUSANNA. I was going to say, when you drive through Phillippi, you just on the roads, you see a lot of non-farming activities. You see dumps, construction. You see mines even. So, what is sort of what's the impact that the current despoliation of the PHA has on the farmers and the produce? And is there any way to claw that back?
Well, that despoliation has been a 10-year project. In fact, probably a 15-year project.
Is it by commission that they?
It's deliberate in that you can protect and manage your farmland if you want to, but if you want to allow it to be despoiled, allow people to do illegal dumping, allow people illegal land use in a farmland, allow people to leave land fallow that's supposed to be agriculturally utilized. Then what happens is you can come in 10 years later and as the knight in shining armor and rescue everybody. And you can say, we are promoting economic development. Now, there are certainly listeners among us who would think that it's no bad thing to put in 40,000 houses. We need housing. But the houses that they have to put in the PHA are definitely upper class, gated units. You can't build low-cost housing in the PHA because the water table is too high. So it's not for the people who need housing. It's for the people who want a countrified lifestyle. But it's the opposite of densification. And cities all over the world are doing their best to densify. Because what happens is that a city, once it's settled itself, is a victim of its own success. So it will settle itself where there's a good water supply, where there's good food supply. And then it will end up sprawling out over the top of that food supply, and you end up without a food supply. So I think we should go back to first principles and say, why are we, as a PHA campaign, fighting to preserve those farmlands? And what we say is that the natural resources that occur in the PHA, which is farmland, and beneath the farmland is the Cape Flats aquifer. So you have drought-proof farmland. Is the last piece of drought-proof farmland in the Cape Flats. So it's the last local food supply for a city of 6 million people. And you don't get rid of that lightheartedly. In 1968, it was proclaimed as a protected farmland. And that's how it should remain. So what happened was, when NAZEER said to me, how on earth did this happen in 2014? I foolishly said to him, well, I'm doing my master's, I can help with the research. And so what we did was we went and we asked for all the paperwork that had gone through both at city level and at provincial level with regard to that application. And we spent 2 years looking through that paperwork, and we found 12 smoking guns. One of the smoking guns was that urban edge shift that was done behind closed doors by Dan Plater and Anton Bradell. There were 11 other smoking guns. And what was happening was that the DA was progressively allowing developers to apply for land. A chip off here, a chip off there, another piece of land over there, a piece of land up at the top. And the other thing that was also being processed was applications for silica sand mines in the north as well. So now if you chip away at 3,000 hectares, 500 hectares at a time, you're going to eventually end up with no farmland whatsoever. And then you're going to lose your local food supply. And there are only 2 food supply areas left in the Cape Flats. It's the Phillippi Horticultural Area and Joostenburg-Vlakte. And Joostenburg-Vlakte is really very badly eroded in terms of industrial developments. I'm sure that you've seen on the N1 when you drive out, you see all the industrial developments that have taken place there. So your local food supply practically doesn't exist anymore. So what the PHA campaign is fighting to do is to preserve the natural resources that belong to us all. And the battle is not about private property and whether you as Mr. Farmer may sell your land to a developer. You certainly may. You have property rights, and the Constitution guarantees those rights. The fight that the PHA campaign has undertaken is to preserve the drought-proof farmland in the name of the right to food security and the right to water security. And we believe that the decision makers, aka people like Anton Bradell, who's making one of the big decisions, which is the environmental authorization, we believe that he should make the decision in favor of the majority, not in favor of one developer who then gets to make a fortune. We believe that the resources in the PHA are so valuable that it doesn't add up to the cost price of 40,000 houses.
Yeah.
It's irreplaceable and it's priceless.
Talking about this, it's quite clear who will face the damage from this. It's ordinary people. There's already a food price crisis, and in fact, everybody in Cape Town will come to the water now. But I first want to spend a little bit of time on who benefits from this. Which developers? Obviously, the city of Cape Town, because they are a rate-seeking machine that needs constant rates. But who are the companies and developers that are benefiting from this abuse of the PHA?
Well, I mean, I want us to take a step back. because I think we need to we need to unpack a little the value of the PHA. So what is the real value of the PHA? So now we talked about the food supply, right? The food supply, as Susanna also pointed out, it's grown on drought-proof farmland. Why is drought-proof farmland important? Surely you can grow food anywhere, right? Now, drought-proof farmland is important under the conditions of climate change, because farming areas that have been traditionally supplying food and other commodities into the food system and beyond are impacted by climate change, droughts and floods, etc., right? And so drought-proof farmland is very, very important to protect, because it can guarantee us a food supply now and in the future. And as we know, we are going through a climate emergency, but that emergency is only accelerating now. It became very apparent during the drought that we had in 2018, and then we had the COVID, which is also linked to the climate, right? And we can go there a little bit. And then there's floods that happened. Now, this winter we had huge floods, right? So these extreme weather is going to increase because of climate change. And so therefore, drought-proof farmland is very, very important for food supply, right? Then the other value that the PHA has is that it is an area where we have an abundant water supply, right? Now, you can't grow food without water, right? And you can't grow food, for example, potatoes, spinach, lettuce, in other parts of the province because it gets too hot in summer. So our area does a lot of potatoes, spinach, and leafy crops during the summer months because we're close to the sea and we have that onshore sea breeze of the Falls Bay coastline, right? And so that also is another value that is linked to drought-proof farmland, right? So these are two important elements and values of the PHA, which the city of Cape Town itself in 2009 declared it irreplaceable. This is their words, not my words. The council said we will not allow any developments here because the land is irreplaceable, right? And that is really the value of the PHA.
So the water, the aquifer, let's get onto that. What my understanding is that the PHA is the groundwater in Cape Town, one of the world's biggest aquifers, which makes the PHA drought-proof. We all remember, we've all kind of memory hold like bathing or washing ourselves with a thimble full of water in 2018, just like we've sort of memory hold COVID. Now, the farmland is a recharge area for the aquifer.
Yeah.
Building on top of that would reduce the recharge area. What is the state of the groundwater underneath the PHA that we can...
Okay, that's a great
assess?
question because this is again talks to another value of the PHA. So beside it being drought-proof farmland and have abundant water to farm, to grow food with, and have the great microclimate to do so, it also is kind of the custodian of the Cape Flats aquifer, which sits in the soil of the PHA. Now, the aquifer is like a bath sponge, a sand-based aquifer, just like a bath. Just imagine a bath sponge that holds a lot of water, right? Now, during winters, that sponge gets filled up with water, right? And so, how does it do that? When rain falls onto the soil that is not paved with car parks, roofs, pipes, and drains, right? That water sinks into the soil and fills up that sponge. Now, this is the only area in the whole of the Cape Flats under which this aquifer sits that allows it to do that. Right? So it's a very important recharge. That's what recharge means. It means that the rain replenishes the groundwater, the aquifer, and that's recharge. And that's an important function of the PHA, and which we have been pointing out to the city and the province in opposing their development permissions that they're handing out to developers, because we as farmers understood the value of the PHA. But we wanted to understand a little bit more about the aquifer. So we held a number of aquifer seminars, right? We held the first one in 2013 in partnership with the Environmental Monitoring Group. And then in 2016, we held another seminar, this time in partnership with WWF and the Water Research Commission, right? So in these seminars, you had this knowledge by people who study these things, the geohydrologists, the researchers, who once and for all unpacked the value of the aquifer, right? But also the value of the aquifer for the city, where the head of the UWC's geohydrology department stated in 2012 that, and he's the preeminent scientist in underground water. He's the chair of the UN underground water, right? So he's not a guy like your politician here who puts on a...
Oh, Elias.
Who puts on a little coat and says he's a doctor, right? And he declared that in 2012 that the aquifer can supply 30% of the city's potable water if it's properly managed. That was 2012. Around the same time, the city and province and different departments, Department of Agriculture, Department of Environment, the city officials, they all were engaging for the last 10 years around climate change and the impact on food and water, right? And in those meetings and those workshops and conferences, which I attended because I was very much interested in it, scientists have been saying that, we are heading for a looming disaster. We will run out of water. Cape Town will run out of water. Scientists have been predicting this 10 years before the 2018 drought hit us. For two reasons. One, they say that the population is increasing and we are not able to build any more new dams to accommodate the increase in population. And secondly, that the impact of climate change on the water resources is going to be severe with droughts and then floods, etc., which is going to impact on our water supply.
Yeah.
And there was a need at the time to diversify the water supply in other ways besides just building more dams, which couldn't be done, right? The city and province regularly ignored all of this studies and research, etc. And the budgets which they, over the last 10 years before 2018, the water budgets were reallocated to other departments and never spent on water infrastructure. Now, a good person to have here on your show is Grant from the ACDP.
Yes, Grant Haskin.
Grant Haskin. Because Grant Haskin was in council, and Grant Haskin was tracking how the city spent their water budget over the last 10 years. And during the water crisis, at the peak of the crisis, it became clear that the crisis that we faced in 2015, 2018 was a crisis of the mismanagement of our water. On one side, the city and province did not spend enough on water resources and did not think or plan to develop alternative water sources, right? And that's what led into the crisis, right? So I mean, the reason why I'm mentioning all of this, because it's linked to our campaign in a way that we were shouting and screaming since 2012, even before then, that this area is important for the aquifer because it makes this farming area drought-proof, which is a drought-proof food supply, but also the city's potable water in the future. And we were ignored. Scientists have come to agreement in these seminars that the area is important for recharge and therefore to manage the aquifer. And we were ignored. And development missions were given to all the developers over the years, which led to a water crisis for us. Not that we ran out of water, but we were struggling to protect the water resource for the city. That was our crisis. So we kind of became like rock stars in 2018 because everybody wanted to hear from us. So what did you say about the aquifer?
But too late.
Yeah. And really, for us, the drought was an amazing intervention from a higher being, right? I mean, I'm Muslim. I believe in in Allah, the Creator. So I think for me, it was a intervention from the Creator to say, you will live and recognize the value of these resources that I placed before you, right? And created the crisis.
And since 2018, since the drought, what has the response been like from officials? Have they come to you and said, like, we're very sorry, we're going to turn back the hands of time?
Not a chance. Look, the existence of the aquifer was an inconvenient truth, because if you acknowledge the aquifer, then you can't pave it over with 40, 50, 60,000
it's kind of like instead of don't look up, it's don't dig down.
So we had some fascinating experiences during 2016 and 17 in that the city was floundering in terms of alternate water supplies. And along came the desal proposal.
Mm-hmm.
We held, the PHA campaign held a silent protest at one of the presentations where Anton Bredell was going to announce a 180 billion rand desal plant. And he had to change his speech before he could stand up, and he stood up and he gave a very sort of mumbling, well, maybe desal will be the last resort. And politically, it was very interesting because, of course, a huge capital project like a desalination plant is going to benefit the party.
Yes.
There's no way that a capital project like that doesn't have a payoff for the person who makes the decision. And what was happening at the time, although we didn't know it, was that Mayor de Lille was busy setting up her own party in the background. And she was damned if she was going to approve a huge capitalist project like that, because then the money would go to the DA. And she was setting up an opposition party to that. So what she did was she stepped in and made a decision about the aquifer, which is very exciting for us, in that they set up a managed aquifer recharge program. So they're busy spending 2 billion rand on putting a managed aquifer recharge program in, where the city will clean the water from the sewage works down the road here, and then they will use, once the water is cleaned to potable water standard, then they recharge the aquifer with that water, and then they will draw the potable water from the north of the PHA, and that will be an alternative water supply for the city. So
Practically, could that work?
It works all over the world.
Yeah.
Windhoek in Namibia has been doing it for 40 years. And in fact, Atlantis has been having their own, they've been off the grid in terms of water for the last 40 years as well. They've got managed aquifer recharge. So there's the Witsands aquifer there, which gets recharged with cleaned water, and then they take water out. So Atlantis has got a closed water loop. They do that in Munich. They do it
California.
They do it in California. The key is you must have recharge. You cannot have people coming in and just withdrawing water and saying we've got a water supply, because then not only do you dry up your aquifer, but what you do is you draw saline water in from the sea, and you destroy your aquifer if you do that. So the drought was a huge blessing for us in terms of that managed aquifer recharge program being set up. From here, you can probably see the cranes at the wastewater treatment plant where they're busy building. It's a 5-year program of building that water treatment plant, and by the end of 5 years, it's actually timed for 2024. At the end of next year, the first water will recharge the Cape Flats aquifer. And then what they can do is not just supply potable water to the city. They will close the water cycle. So what happens is that as much water as gets used by the city and then goes out to the wastewater treatment plant, the same water, which at the moment is being cleaned, using water and electricity, it's been cleaned and then it's been sent out into the ocean. Now that water is going to be cleaned well enough for us to be able to recharge the aquifer with that. So you close your water loop, and that is sensible for a city of nearly 6 million people.
Yeah.
Now, Roscoe, you were mentioning that, what is the quality of the water?
Yes,
Right.
that's going to ask because
Yes.
it seems that they, with all the runoff and with all the silica mining and the activity, that would have an impact on the quality of the water that's recharging the aquifer. To my amateur mind,
Well, you were right. There is that threat.
maybe I can be like Elias and be a what's a geohydrologist?
Yes, and there were many geohydrologists, specialists, who are pronouncing that the aquifer water is polluted, that we're all going to die eating all the vegetables for the PHA. It was another narrative that was that were in favor of the developer narrative. And there were even people like Tony Jones and others in the PHA who own land there, who are not farmers, who own land there, who were pushing the narrative that this area is a disaster.
It's too late.
You can't save it.
Yeah.
Best we sell the land and develop it because the water is even polluted, etc. But all the supermarket chains have a very high water quality standard. So they regularly test. Farmers regularly have to test water, the water used for irrigating the crops. But I want to take a step back to where we were in 2017. Now, this was a year before day zero in 2018. Now, we understood that the aquifer is important, and we tried to argue our case against these developments that the city and the province is approving, that it's going to damage the aquifer, right? Destroy it, and therefore destroy farmers' livelihoods, farmers' irrigation water, and also the city's potable water in the future. So Birdie came to us and said, you know what, Mr. Burdell is going to make a big announcement that there's no alternative but to have a desalination plant. So he was going to make this announcement at the press club in the city. And we heard this, and we were like really, really upset, because why would he talk about desalination when we've been telling him all along that there is groundwater that we could be using to diversify the city's water supply, which is what is needed, and then that he should concentrate on that, right, as an alternative water supply. But no, he wanted to announce this big 15 billion rands desalination plant at the cost of the taxpayer, an annual cost of 1.5 billion rands to run, built right next door to Koeberg nuclear power plant, right? And this was, at the time, it was said to be money from the Israelis, who has the technology to do this, and there was going to be a huge kickback for the DA. In the National Parliament, it was declared by one of the opposition people there that the DA was about to get 200 million rands for allowing this desalination plant to go ahead. So we didn't look at those politics. What we looked at is, what is it going to cost for us to drink that desalination water, and how is it going to, and for our health, but also at what cost out of our pockets, right? So desalination is a very expensive process, right? So the water is very expensive. So basically it's privatizing our water, right? And the same thing is desalination plant takes seawater and takes out the salt, right? Then what happens to the salt? They throw it back into the sea. And what happens to the sea marine life? That gets destroyed, right? So it was a bad idea all around. The cost of it, the environmental impact of it, and the cost to working class communities who are struggling with water, where the DA was putting blue meters in their homes and making them pay putting them on a drip system because they calculated that every house should have only 4 people. In our communities, there's 5, 6, 7, 10 people in the house and backyarders.
Yeah.
And, and so people were struggling at the time. So it was very important for us to go to this big announcement at the press club to break this narrative down, you see, to provide an alternative narrative where we said, why talking about desalination when we just have to manage our available water resources better? Why don't we clean our wastewater? Why don't we conserve water? And why do people like S.A.B. Miller have historical rights to water when people don't even have water in the taps, right?
So Newlands.
Newlands, yes. So all of these things happened during our campaign during the water crisis. We were part of the water crisis coalition at the time. It was a group of unions, civil society organizations, even some political parties were involved, etc., etc. We were trying to address the crises that was happening, right? And as Susanna said, despite that, right, we still have the city and the province still wanting to pave over the area and destroy the water.
That's what I can't work out. I mean, they international experts, local experts, common sense, even financial sense when it comes to the desalination plants. There was one desalination plant that they put out a tender for, and then the service provider came out and said, no, you're lying about the water quality. Eventually they had to, I'm told that they gave away the one desalination plant to a private sector. But why would they persist with selling the PHA to the highest bidder and not listening to common sense and expertise?
The decision making is not made on the merit of the argument. The decision is made on how much money is a developer prepared to pay to the decision maker's party.
Right. So
now that's an established fact. We've got that from people who were in the DA, and Brett Heron is absolutely honest about the fact that big development decisions are made on the basis of what has the developer been paying the decision maker's party. And Brett Heron will tell you that the biggest fundraiser in the DA is Anton Bredell. Now, why Anton Bredell? Because he makes all the development decisions. So what do you do as an activist who's trying to oppose these sorts of decisions from being made? What happens is, all along the way, every time there's a rezone application or an environmental authorization application or a water use license application, we are allowed, according to democracy, we're allowed to make a comment on that. And then that comment is put before the decision maker, and then the decision maker reads our comment. He reads the applicant's comment, the application, and then he'll make a decision. And it's his democratic right to decide that what we're talking is bunk, and he will decide probably in favor of the developer, especially if it's in his party's favor to make that decision. So what do we do as activists? We make darn sure that our paperwork that goes in is of the highest standard. We don't have any money. We're not a funded organization. We're a public benefit organization. And what we do is that we have experts at all the universities in Cape Town. So at UCT, we have the food experts. At UWC, we have geohydrologists. We make sure that our comment is of the highest standard so that the comment can end up in front of an impartial judge. Because we can go to a judge and say, Mr. Judge, we gave you, or Mrs. Judge, as it was the last time, we gave the decision maker this information. We feel, and you might agree with us, that they misconstrued the information. And this was the exciting thing that happened since we saw you last, in that we saw you last in 2016.
Yes.
In 2017, we filed a court case with those 12 smoking guns. By 2019, we went to court with 4 of those smoking guns. And in 2020, we got a ruling which said that we'd won half of the court case. So the one part that we didn't win was the urban edge shift. That decision had been made behind closed doors in 2011, and the judge ruled that it was moot because it was too old. And she said that subsequent decisions had been made that cemented the developer's permissions to go ahead with the development, and she couldn't change that decision. It was almost 10 years. The second decision that we didn't win was we wanted to get a long-term protection for the PHA. We wanted to protect the agricultural land from being subdivided, and we missed out on that one. But the two big things that did happen was that the judge suspended the environmental authorization that Bredell granted and suspended the rezone that the city had granted under De Lille. So that meant that the rezone and the environmental authorization had to go back to the drawing board. The judge said some very interesting things. She said, in a time of climate change, when there is water scarcity, you didn't do an impact on what would the impact on climate change be if you paved over the drought-proof farmland, and what would the impact be on the water supply. And so the developer has had to go back and get experts to attest to the idea which they purvey, is they say it's not going to impact on water supply, it's not going to impact on climate change. But they're going so slowly that what's happening is that policy and the law has been developing since the ruling in 2020. 3 years, in fact, since the first decisions that we took to court, those decisions were made in 2015, especially climate change policy has developed a great deal. And you know that the Paris Agreement has been signed. So now there's some interesting elements. The national government ratified the Paris Agreement, which says that we're going to have zero emissions by 2030. The PHA is an area where you can sink carbon. So that's the opposite of emissions. So the city really, really needs an area where they can sink carbon. For every hectare of land in the PHA which you put, either you put compost on or you grow vegetables, the very act of growing vegetables is sinking carbon into the ground. So you are negating the city's carbon emissions. Now, if you farmed the whole of the PHA without fertilizer as an agroecological farming method, you'd probably be able to sink up to a third of the city's carbon emissions. Because if you took the whole city's food waste, and you must ask Nazeer about this fascinating stuff, if you took all of the city's food waste and you didn't put it into the landfill where it emits greenhouse gases, if you turned it into compost and you turned that into the soil and grew people's food out of that, then you would get as near as you can to having a city which has got zero carbon emissions. So now the policy has changed and said we have to have a climate resilient city. The climate resilience of the city, the jewel in the city's climate resilience, is the Phillippi Horticultural Area. Now, we've had a lot of success with lobbying the current city governors. The new bunch, they're young, they understand climate change, they understand that economic development is not just building houses out in far-flung areas. They understand that they can make decisions that will leave a better legacy after their 5 years in power, or maybe their 10 years in power, than the previous bunch did. But you still end up with a setting where, even though somebody like Eddie Andrews, who has brought high-level people from the city out to the PHA, and they've stood at the edge of the farmlands and they've seen the extent to which the PHA is valuable to the city. Even when Eddie Andrews ends up speaking to those who are senior to him in his party, he ends up being informed that it's much more important to fund the party than to leave a legacy of preserving the resources for the city for the best use of the residents of the city. So what we do as activists then is...
But Susanna, I want you to tell Roscoe and the viewers, despite, because we were talking about the water crisis, right? When we went to court, right, to oppose the city's decision, the province's decision, and developers wanting to develop the area, and we had the water crisis, who opposed us in court?
Well, it was the city of Cape Town and the province opposed us in court.
They have to defend their...
They have to defend their decisions.
Yes.
But they're using our taxpayers' money to defend decisions that go against us, our taxpayers' best interests.
It was a very bizarre situation. Here, we were trying to protect the farming area, the water, and the ecological value of the PHA for everybody in the city, right? For the benefit of everybody in the city. And the city was using our tax money to oppose us in court.
But the judge came up with something very interesting. She gave us a ruling. Her main reasoning was the water scarcity and the climate change. What she did was she then made a ruling that you cannot make your environmental authorization and you cannot make your rezone decision unless you take climate change into account. So that was a new ruling, and that means that every single municipality in South Africa now will not be able to make a development decision unless they take the impact on climate change into account.
And that should be at the center of the decisions rather than like rate seeking by the city. That's one of the most important things on which they can pin their decisions in the future. But it seems to me that throughout this process of over a decade now, the longer they can kick this thing into touch, the more despoliation happens, and then it makes the PHA sort of unviable. Rather, the aim is, what is the output of the PHA in terms of like can we see how it has declined during this time? What metrics can we see the effectiveness of the despoliation campaign?
Well, there are a number of ways you can tell. So one is that when you drive through the area and you see all the land that is not farmed, that's one measure.
It should be farmed,
right?
basically.
Because these are not only big developers who are wanting to develop the area and turn their 200,000 into 2 million per hectare, but also small, what I call bucket developers, right? They buy a hectare here, 5 hectares there, 10 hectares there, 1 acre here, 3 acres there.
In anticipation of one day they can develop it and they can flip it.
It's like putting money in a bank,
yeah.
Right? And so that's one measure. The other measure you can see is that all the illegal dumping taking place in our area.
Right. How big of a problem is illegal dumping?
It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem. And, it's such a huge problem that our local civic, of which I was a secretary from 2008 to 2012, our big problem, one of the big problems that we tried to address was illegal dumping. And we took it all the way from the ward councillor to the mayor's office and Bradel's office, right? And they were forced to sit around the table with us and develop workshops around how they're going to tackle illegal dumping, right? And so we brought a whole bunch of ideas around what measures they could be using. And you know what? The city implemented all those measures that we suggested. We, a local civic, right? Brain mensa. Nie wat mense, nie brain mensa, right? And the city adopted all our measures and gave us no credit. And on top of that, still didn't enforce illegal dumping bylaws in our area.
Are the city not compelled to then to tackle illegal dumping?
They are compelled, as well as Bradel's department.
Do they do that though? If you call them up and say, look, there's a few lorries pulling up, they've dumped here, what is the response time of the city in cleaning up?
Well, I can tell you, I don't even know who to call, right? I don't even know who to call if somebody dumps across the road from me, right? It's such a difficult thing to do.
But
right?
what they do, whatever gets reported to them, they just get the person to sign a admission of guilt and a a fine. And that doesn't just extend to illegal dumping. It extends to illegal building of houses on farmland and that sort of thing. But I want to flip this and talk about the wins that we've had.
Okay.
There was the first big development of 500 hectares in 2009 that went in. And all those decisions that were made behind closed doors that we only found out about between 2015 and 2017 when we were examining those decisions. But in the meantime, the other corner of the PHA, De Lille shifted the urban edge again on the western corner of the PHA, and there were some developments that were supposed to go in, hosted by Mark Wilcox. She built Bloberg Strand with Mark Wilcox, and so he was a big developer there. And so just by public participation and making sure that we put the comments in and that we sat down in front of the Municipal Planning Tribunal when they were making the rezone decisions for those developments, we managed to get the Municipal Planning Tribunal to say they were irrational. It's irrational to put in a shopping centre in the middle of farmlands when you need the farmlands for economic development and you need it for employment and economic development for the least among us. And so those rulings, now that those rulings are made, the land on the left side of the PHA is exactly the same as the land on the right side of the PHA. So when the next decision is remade, remember we had that rezone decision of the big development suspended. When they retake that decision, those decisions are precedent-setting rulings, where you can't suddenly say that the land on the right side of the PHA is different to the land on the left side of the PHA.
Yep.
And so we did get some rationality from the Municipal Planning Tribunal, and those developments on the west side of the PHA have fallen away. Yeah. And we've got some very good wording of in those rulings that we can bring before the decision maker. And especially, well, we've already said there's no point putting it before the decision maker, but especially putting it before a judge, because that's where you go and you say, sorry, but this decision was irrational. It was a decision that would not have been made by any other ordinary person with the same material in front of them. They wouldn't have made that same decision. What decision would you have made, Mr. Judge? And so we're pretty sure what's happening by now is that environmental authorization is in front of Bradell again. It's been in front of him since May this year. We don't know when he's going to make a decision. We do know that he's going to approve it because that developer is a very loyal donor to the DA.
Who are these people who are benefiting?
Well, the developer is Wenzel Oka. It was originally Wenzel Oka. There are a few twists in this tale, in that Wenzel Oka went off and got investors to buy into his development company, and those investors were actually trade union pension funds. So he bought some land for 36 million rand. That was the 500 hectares.
His promise was, I'm going to get this developed, you're going to see a return on these funds. So
in the billions, 47 billion.
Right. And
so you just invest 550 million, and then we're going to build this.
These are ANC Alliance trade unions, COSATU trade unions. Yes,
COSATU trade unions.
I was going to ask, like, we're talking about the city and the province as DA controlled. What are national going to do about it? But if there is a link to national government and the alliance partners standing and the pension and those funds benefiting from it, I can begin to understand why there's gridlock. Sorry to interrupt you, sir.
Gridlock is a very good term, because that's what we've experienced all along the way. You can't understand, how does somebody like Bradell promote and approve of a largely ANC idea? Where did that come along? Why is Bradell promoting a COSATU? Comrade Anton. There you go. So the interesting thing is that we're going to rerun these EIA permissions and these rezone permissions trying to develop the law in a way that benefits everybody in South Africa. So the one benefit for people in South Africa is for development decisions to take climate change into account. So that's the one decision. We've put, before Bradell, we've said, this is the climate change policy, and it was ratified by the South African government. You are an incumbent of the South African government, therefore you have to make a decision that is rational in keeping with what they've ratified, and we're going to see. Our argument before the judge will be then, when he gives permission for the development, that he's making a decision against an international treaty. So that's the first time that's going to be tested in South African law, unless something comes up before then. And then the other one is food security. One of the most important things that we've never had a ruling on. We've got food security in the South African Constitution. So Section 27 gives people the right to access to food. And but we've never had a court case where a decision has to be made in favor of the people who eat the food versus the developer who's going to put 40,000 houses on top of where the food should be grown for eternity.
You can't reclaim that back.
You can't reclaim it back.
Yeah.
And when you're making a decision about how you use your environment, you're making a decision about how future generations benefit from it. So the future generations is also an element that has to be tested in court. So it's not like we're not having fun here, Roscoe.
No, you guys are sticking to it. But I want to come back to this Oka guy and the other people. So Oka, he sells this thing he sells this development. So I'm gonna build. Give me your funds. I'm gonna build this development. The return will be 100x. And then he it turns out that he can't build it. So he's still sitting on this land. Who are the other players that want to?
Well, I'm telling you, Roscoe, every
they
development that we have faced. Now there are 6 developers in total we have faced. 5 of those developments are housing developments, and one is a Consul silica sand mine. Consul Glass wants to mine our area.
Consul Glass
wants to mine our area, right? And we have managed to stop 5 of those 6 out of court, like Susanna says. 5 out of court, just using our democratic right to participate in the public process around these development permissions, right? So that's something we've done. We didn't run to court and run to lawyers. We made sure that we did our research. Like Susanna said, we got help from experts who informed us about our blind spots, etc., and we tackled those. So every one of those developments have a unique story. Now you're talking about Wenzel Oka. Now there's a unique story there. Because it's very unique because.
Just put that thing up that the views expressed in this show, those are the host, and they can't come and see some things.
Very interesting. So Wenzel Oka, he's this big pension fund guru. The financial person who invests pension fund money, and he makes everybody rich, right? He didn't do that in Woodstock, where he shut down a whole factory, and while he bought the factory with PIC money, right? With a promise in Woodstock to protect those jobs. I think it was 500 jobs of those textile workers in Woodstock, and he ended up selling all the machinery for scrap and selling the property, and everybody was out on the street. This is the Mr. Oka that we're talking about here. So he wanted to do the same thing in our area. He wanted to buy agricultural land for cheap, make a ton of money, right? And then, sail off on his yacht into the sunset. Except he didn't counter dealing with this brain mensa on the Cape Flats. So he bought land between 2004 and 2008. He bought 500 hectares, and from farmers who were just landlords. They weren't really farmers; they were just landlords.
Right.
Right. The family may have farmed, before, but they currently who own the land weren't farming anymore. He bought this land from them, 500 hectares, and he paid them 36 million rands. Then what Mr. Oka did was, he formed another company, which he made himself the CEO and the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer and the Chief Executive Officer.
And the COO.
And COO and whatever OOO. And then he sold the land to himself at 500 million rands.
Right, nominally.
Is it 500 million rands?
550 million.
550 million rands. On paper.
On paper, he
On
sold
paper.
it to inflate the value of
To
it.
inflate the value, exactly. Exactly, to inflate the value. Then he had this beautiful idea, this brainwave, that he was going to put up this huge development. And then he went and approached the 5 COSATU unions who are aligned with the ANC. And again, why isn't the ANC really opposing these developments in the PHA, right? They could be snot clapping the DA, but they don't.
Every day.
Right? Every day, but they don't, because they are also implicated in this development. He goes and says to these institutions that he wants to put up this development and they should invest in him, and they invest to the tune of 500 million rands. Right? Okay? So from 36 million rands, he's got an investment of 500 million rands.
Of real money.
Of real money.
Based on the made up sum that he
value the land on.
Okay.
Right? You get me?
Yes.
Right?
Sound Trumpish or?
Very Trumpy. Very Trump.
Yeah. Okay.
Ahead of his time.
And then of course we were opposed to this. Remember, he bought this on a promise that he got investors on a promise that he will put this development up and make everybody billionaires, right? But of course we opposed the development. So what the investors didn't realize was that there was a problem in the development that is being heavily opposed by the city, including us, the campaign, right? And so they wanted to extricate themselves.
Sorry, Nazir. This is still when in 2009 when the city said you can't develop there because of the value of the land,
Yes.
the value that the land has to the city and the well-being of its citizens.
This was
Right.
this conversation was going even after that, right? Because what happened when the city said no, Mr. Bradell, our famous environmentalist and development planner, sat with Mr. Dan Plater, our esteemed mayor, and decided, no, they're going to move the urban edge because there's just too much money here, right? And so the conversation about development still continued with the investors. But the investors were getting weary. It's now 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years down the line, and they realized actually this is a huge problem for them. One, that they were deceived, I will put it mildly, deceived by the value of the land that Mr. Oka had put up.
Right.
And they wanted their money back. It took Mr. Oka to court.
Oh, jeez.
Yes.
Well, what happened then?
Well, the latest now out of that court case that went to the Constitutional Court, that Susanna should speak about it, but the long and the short of it is, the Constitution ruled that Oka has lost his share in the... Oka must pay back 200 million rands of that money, and he doesn't have the right to be a shareholder.
In the company,
In the company
entities
itself.
that he's...
So the company that he started, now he has been removed as a shareholder, and he has to pay back 200 million rands.
To whom?
To the
investors.
To the investors, the unions.
To the trade unions. So the trade unions are very happy. They also made lots of money over COVID because that 550 million had been invested in one of the pharmaceutical companies, and but there were nice returns. So now what's happened is that the board of Oakland City Development Company.
Oh, Oakland from Oka, is he?
From Oakland.
Yeah,
Oakland.
right.
Oakland City Development Company, as we understand it, the board doesn't consist of any developers anymore. The board consists of the financial planner for each one of those different trade union pension funds. So those financial advisors who originally went to court to get their money back from Oka are now sitting on the board of Oakland's City Development Company. And there's no way that those unions are going to withdraw their money because
they've been conned and they're in a hole now.
Board members.
Right.
Board members travel down to Cape Town 4 times a year. They get paid nicely to attend board meetings, which are really important. And, people are sitting pretty. How much money, Roscoe? I once calculated and I can't remember what it is. How much money do you make off 550 million a year?
Depends on the interest.
How much is okay? So it's 12,000 per month per million. Now multiply that up. How much money is now? Oakland's City Development Company is under financial curatorship. It has been since 2012. And we keep saying in all these applications, how are you giving development permission to a development company that is under financial curatorship?
And it's clearly crooked.
Who signs off on this?
So the guy in charge was a lawyer.
Kriel.
Let's not say names at the moment because I can't remember exactly. But the lawyer who was appointed as the financial curator is now the CEO and he doesn't run his own law practice anymore because he gets paid $1 million a year to be the financial curator of Oakland City Development Company. So you don't have a setting where one of the reasons why we won against the other development, which was UVest in the West.
Yes.
One of the reasons we won was because that money was put up by Investec. And Investec eventually said to Mark Wilcox, when are we going to get our return on this investment? And ultimately it turned out that Mark Wilcox ended up having to sell that land because the Investec wanted their money back. And he was paying too much interest on borrowing that much money. So that would be a natural sort of recidivism of a development proposal. But none of those natural forces exist in the way that... So look, your audience would have somebody there who can investigate these financial angles for us. We've never been able to go down that road because there's a different language. It's a completely different world that we don't understand. But for as long as Oakland City is sitting there with 550 million, they went to court and complained about the fact that they'd spent 45 million opposing us over the years. But what's 45 million when you've got 550 million earning interest?
Yes.
on a daily basis? So it would be fantastic if we could find somebody who understands those sorts of dynamics, because we do think that there must be a way to connect the dots between decision makers who make decisions that are irrational and the fact that there are investment advisors who are sitting on boards and conflicts of interests and those sorts of elements. We don't mind doing this forever. We really don't.
And we have a succession plan too. So
Yes.
if we get bumped off, there's plenty of people who's going to take our place.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Consol glass sand mine in the north.
Let's talk about that. But I first want to say that okay, we'll come to the comments soon. But this is an extraordinary episode, or rather, coming together of, that's the one time political parties can come together. We've seen like the ANC alliance partners. We've seen, okay, now I guess Patricia de Lille's in good. We've seen the DA guys. So there's like buy-in from all sorts of political parties and the financial sector and all of these companies to screw Cape Town's food and water security. It's shocking. And the price is $500 million maybe even more because of the interest that accrued and a layer of people who are employed or deployed to service this. It's absolutely shocking. I thought we were going to talk about food and water security. We're talking about like a Tom Clancy novel, yeah.
Yes, it is.
Right, so comments. Hanif Tseke Nazir is absolutely correct. The officials don't listen to experts as they are too arrogant. And then Lucian David says, yo, I'm late, but I'm here now, needing to get my dose of the Roscoe Palm show. Thank you, Lucian Davids. Ansaf Mohammed says there are areas such as Manenberg where pavements next to residential flats or dumps even after notifying the city consistently. Nice beard cut, Mr. Roscoe Palm. Thank you. What about redness? Cool. So then, okay, console glass, because silica mining, I've seen that's big. You drive past a few silica mines that are very close to the road.
You've got some pictures of console there, which I emailed through to you, which shows you the before and after. Now that's a picture of the PHA, and one or other of those are pictures of the farmlands, and there are few Cape Townians who've driven through and realized the scale at which the food is grown. Because when I joined the PHA campaign in 2014, since then the farmed areas have grown by 10%. So areas of land that were sitting fallow when I joined the PHA campaign are now all planted up, because the farmers are desperately trying to increase the areas that they're growing food on. Nazeer must speak to the fact that the demand for food is so high, and also all you need is a little bit of a taxi strike, and all of a sudden your vegetables and your eggs and your meat are not in the supermarkets anymore. I mean, that speaks to how important it is to have the PHA in your backyard. Now, one of the sad things is that the sand in the PHA has got a very high silica content. And in fact, it's the last reserve of silica sand in the world.
Wow.
So Consol Glass is desperate to mine. They've made an application for a 50-hectare mine in the north. We know that this is a piecemeal application. So they'll do what all other mining companies do, is you apply for 50 hectares, and you get it approved because there'll be no impact of 50 hectares. But then we know that they've got prospecting rights for another 500 hectares in the PHA. And so one of the sad things about silica sand mining is that you dig away 30 meters deep of the sand. So imagine 50 hectares of farmland, 30 meters deep hole dug in the soil. That then digs into the layer of the aquifer.
Well, of course, you don't have to imagine it, right, Susanna? You just have to go to Manenberg.
We've got pictures.
You just have to go to Manenberg to see what it looks like, what the mine looks like.
I sent 2 emails. There should be some.
Let me
should be some pictures
Yeah.
from the first email which I sent, which show you what the Athlone sand mine looks like. And so what has happened is that the city gave permission for that mine to go ahead in 2015. That rezone was done behind our backs. We didn't participate in that. We did participate in the environmental authorization being granted.
By Bradell?
Yeah, being granted by Bradell.
Our friend Bradell comes up all the time, eh?
Yeah, he's everywhere. So, yeah. And the thing about Bradell, he's so established that he's really the guy behind the throne of local government and all of these things. So,
The trouble is now you get involved with the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, and they are impenetrable, absolutely impenetrable. You don't need. There's no way you can speak rationally to these people. There's no way that you can get documents out of them when you hire documents. You know, you're supposed to be able to apply for documents and get it within 90 days. Not a chance. We need to talk about the big picture of somebody like Consol Glass wanting to mine in the PHA and wanting to mine the last reserve of silica sand. And so you end up with a conflict of interest between the right to food security by 6 million people versus the right to make bottles by one company. Now, you can argue more broadly for economic development when you're talking about Consol glass, because you're talking about wine bottles and that sort of thing. But there is no effort on the part of winemakers to recycle glass. There's the only people who recycle glass is Coca-Cola, and they only do that for cosmetic purposes. But the rest of our glass is not recycled, and there is no legislation to recycle that glass. Now, in a time of climate change, when consumption has got to slow down, and you've got to stop destroying the environment in favor of the capitalist system, this is where we are wanting to put our hands up and say, actually, food security comes first. And Consol Glass can get on jolly well with just recycling the glass that they've already made. There's a heck of a lot of glass that goes into the landfills that doesn't need to go into the landfills. And Consol Glass have reconfigured themselves to be able to handle recycled glass. They do have a whole, their factory is configured to process recycled glass. And all we're saying is, sorry, mate, but you're just going to have to expand on that angle, because the right to food and the right to water supersedes the right to consumption.
Well, of course, we weren't the only ones who pointed this out. I mean, Consol applied in 2012. The city approved the rezone of the land. Bredel approved the EIA. We appealed the EIA. We lost, right? And it was going to go ahead. Except down the line, another permission was required from Consol Glass, and that was from the Department of Water and Sanitation. And
because that's a water-intensive
issue.
Process to process all that silica.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Water Tribunal, who sat on this decision, said, well, I'm sorry, but we're not going to allow you to mine this area because you're going to pollute the aquifer, which is going to destroy the potable water for the city. It's going to destroy the farmlands. It's going to destroy the heritage of the area and farmers' irrigation water. So no, we're not going to give you a water use license. And then the company, we thought we had won in 2019, because we even got a call from one of Consol's lawyers, who sent his child to do a project on the PHA, because he was Consol's lawyer, but he sent his child to the PHA to do a project because he was actually very much in favor of protecting the PHA. This is the bizarre thing about what's happened with the professionals involved in these developments. In any case, they reconfigured themselves as a company, got BEE players on board, dished out some BEE shares, and now it's a new company, but Consol still owns 70% of the shares.
Right.
Right?
Classic fronting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they reapplied again for a water use license, and again in 2020 it was refused.
I think these are the images.
So that's the
that
Consol land as it is this year. It's a wetland, and one or two pictures further on.
we can see that's sort of like the aquifer being recharged effectively. This is winter. This is right, and this is the mine.
This is the current mine in Athlone. That's what will happen to the land, is that they will dredge out the 30 meters deep of water, and that's what it looks like.
This is the mine in Manenberg. You know, for all the 70 years of this mine's existence, only the last 10 years they actually put up a fence.
Go back to the Manenberg mine.
In the last 10 years only, they put up a fence. You know how many children drowned in this mine?
I mean, you drive past it, you don't really get the scale of how big this thing is actually.
And
it's an environmental disaster.
That's 50 hectares, and they've got prospecting rights for 550 hectares in the PHA. So you take away a sixth of the PHA due to Consol mining in the north, and you take away a sixth of the PHA due to Oakland City in the south, and you just keep chipping away at the PHA, you end up without a farmlands in the end. So you've got to stop somewhere. You can't just carry on.
And the other interesting thing about, I remember I told you, Roscoe, every development has an interesting story. I gave you the story about Wenzel Oker and how he came about this development. Now here is another interesting story here. Besides the fact that the Water Tribunal turned down this water use license twice, right?
For the PHA.
To protect the PHA,
Yes.
and because it was going to, the mining operation was going to pollute the aquifer. In their second attempt to get a water use license, they, the company employed the so-called experts of the PHA and of the aquifer to make the case for them. The same experts who is employed by the city to protect the aquifer.
Right. So it's kind of like consultants who work for. That's crazy.
It's a
Right.
singular
Who are these-
conflict of interest. If they were lawyers, it would never have been allowed. And we raised this because the consultants who Consul employed to apply for their new water use license are the same consultants in Voto Africa, are the same consultants who are implementing the managed aquifer recharge program in the PHA. Now,
Who are the so the individuals or entire consultancies that are doing this?
the entire consultancy of Voto Africa. Now, in 2017, when we went to court, the director of Voto Africa, who's Chris Hartnedy, gave us paperwork. Remember, we said we had different people volunteering paperwork for us to have our expert opinions so that we could go to court, and we got paperwork from Chris Hartnedy, and he attested to the fact that it was really important to preserve the primary recharge area of the Cape Flats aquifer so that the managed aquifer recharge program could go ahead safely. And he also attested to the ethical body that he belongs to as a geohydrologist, where you have to give information in the best interests of the public.
And the environment.
And the environment. And the tragedy is that Chris Hartnedy and his wife both passed away during COVID. And the new people who've taken over Voto Africa seem to think that the only requirement is that you don't need ethics to run your company, you just have to be making lots of money. And we've raised this conflict of interest in the monitoring committee for the managed aquifer recharge program. But the geohydrologists, the ones who work in private, they're an old boys club. They don't tell on each other. And they've got to keep all options open so that you can, as a geohydrologist, you can go and testify for a developer if you need to make.
So the same company whose previous CEO and second in command gave us affidavits in our court case in 2020 to say that this area is important for the aquifer recharge, it's important for the public good, and important for the environment. After they pass away, the same company is working for Consul Glass and submitted paperwork for Auckland City to basically say to Auckland City, well, you can pay for this area, no problem. It won't cause harm to the aquifer.
Well, let's
Right.
do that disclaimer
So
quickly. They didn't submit paperwork for Auckland City, but they didn't submit paperwork against Auckland City. That's the point. Is that if they are supposed to be managing the managed aquifer recharge program in the best way possible, they are supposed to make sure that the recharge zone for the aquifer remains free and clear. And Voto Africa is working on an aquifer protection zone, and they know that the qualities of an aquifer protection zone are that you don't have anything that inhibits the recharge of the aquifer, which in the case of Auckland City would be 40,000 houses paving over the area.
These
And
guys.
Consul Mine.
Yeah, those guys.
Okay.
Sadly, those guys, because
Jeez.
some of the most fascinating work that we've done is on the aquifer and the aquifer, the aquifer seminars that we held. We've had experts at those aquifer seminars, We were friends with these guys.
Well, I think now we're going more towards the water, right?
Yeah, let's put the website of Mvoto up. I think it's important that people know, see the friendly faces behind this spoliation. Allegedly.
Well,
Apparently, actually, not allegedly.
look, they don't seem to think it's a problem. We point out the big red flag around the conflict of interest in working to protect the aquifer and getting paid by the city of Cape Town to do so, but also working for companies that not only us but the water use license authorities have said it's going to destroy the aquifer, and then they get to work for these companies as well. So for us it's a huge red flag, but they don't seem to think so, right? And this is an ongoing conversation we're having in our monitoring committee. Now I want to expand a little bit about the monitoring committee. What is actually happening now with the water in the PHA?
Yeah.
Since we had the drought, city realized, actually, there's no really political support for a desalination plant. 15 billion rands, 1.5 billion rands annual costs to the taxpayer, to us resident tax people pay resident taxes. And so they have to diversify the water supply. And under Delil, one of the great things she did, right? She didn't do many good things, but this was the big thing that she did that I will always, think of her, is that she shifted the focus from desalination to groundwater. And so she invested in the same consultancy in Mvoto Africa to do a research on the aquifer, and to see the viability of extracting water for the city's potable water use. Right? Remember, we can't build any more dams, so we have to find water elsewhere. Mvoto Africa comes back and says, well, this aquifer is amazing. Of course, we already knew that. Okay, this aquifer is so big, it can hold the equivalent of all the dams that supply the city of Cape Town with water. That amount of water is sitting in this aquifer. Right? The PHA is an important part of the aquifer because it's the recharge zone of the aquifer. Right? And so the city invested in this aquifer. Right? But there are 3 groundwater projects they invested, but this is the one of the 3. Now, the city gets a water use license from the Department of Water and Sanitation to extract water from the aquifer. But the city is not allowed to extract water without putting water back into this aquifer. Right? So that's the licensing condition. That you can extract water from this aquifer up to 6 million megaliters a day, but you will have to find the water somewhere else to put it back in. Because you can't be taking the water out of the bath,
Yes.
and you end up with the empty bath, right? And in our case, the aquifer is also a coastal aquifer, which means that if the aquifer is over extracted, if we take out too much water out of this bath, salt water comes in, and it will happen like what people of Palestine in Gaza is experiencing now, as children get blue bottle disease, which they turn blue because the water is polluted with seawater, because that's the only water they have now in Gaza. And that will happen to our aquifer. So the managed aquifer recharge program is exactly that the city is allowed under license from the Department of Water and Sanitation to extract water from the aquifer, but they must find water to put in the aquifer. So where is city going to find this water? So around us, we have a few water treatment plants, right? Where the city is processing, at one plant, 10 million liters a day, right? And other areas as well. So the city is now putting up a water treatment plant in Zikoflei to clean the wastewater. Effectively, it's going to be cleaned twice. So the existing system is there, those ponds,
Yes.
those pond system, where all those birds are.
Yes, and then it must be treated again before it's put back into the aquifer.
Hang on. So then, So what happens is the wastewater goes off to Zikoflay. Then it gets treated in the first phase. Then it goes to this brand new water treatment plant, gets treated a second time. And at that point, the water is agricultural grade. In other words, we can use it to grow crops on it. Is that good? Right. Yeah. Then the water gets piped from there, Zikoflay, into our area, and it gets piped into 250 boreholes that pump that water into the soil. It's called artificial recharge, right? Now, of the 250 boreholes, some of them are injection boreholes. We will take this treated water and put it into the soil. And a third of that would be extraction boreholes, where they will take water out, right? And a third of that would be monitoring boreholes, where they will monitor the quality, the quantity, and the flow of the water in the aquifer. So now the water gets treated twice, pumped into the soil, right? The water flows in the soil for a year. And then the soil is another form of filter.
Yes.
Right? So all the microbes and biology in the soil also clean the water. That's the third phase of cleaning. Then the water goes through the aquifer. Then the extraction bowls are placed to extract water out. Then the water gets filtered a fourth time in the water treatment facility in the PHO, which you can see. I should take you for a trip there.
I'm happy to.
Then
but
that water
last time somebody promised me a trip somewhere was Angus Mackenzie, and he hasn't delivered on that. he was going to take me to Steenbras Dam. I'm going to clip this and I'm going to show you. But yeah, I'll come with you again to the PHA.
Yeah. So you see, so this is the MA project. Now this project is very, very important for the city because it makes us water resilient. It makes us water resilient, right? In other words, if we have another drought, then we have something to fall back on.
It's our insurance policy.
Exactly, right? Now, don't mess with the insurance policy by paving over the area, please, guys, right? Okay?
Or by building a silica sand mine into
or building a constant silica sand mine, okay? You know, I mean, at first, we had this whole thing about the city and province coming for, and developers are coming for our land. And now they're coming for our water, right?
Yeah.
But this time we're saying, no, actually, this water has to be managed properly, right? And it's every person in the city's responsibility to take care of this aquifer. Not only us activists in the area, because this is what's gonna be the difference between having empty taps and having water in our taps.
Look, we're going to talk about land reform now, and I think it would be good to do that. But just before I leave the voter thing, I'm looking at if the Who We Are page is up to date. I'm looking at Ronnie Kingwell, Cornelius Riemann, Dylan Bragg, the principal geologist, senior geologist, all the seniors, besides the senior climatologist, all the seniors, it's white people. And of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of the 9 seniors that I have in the, it's like it's 8 white men and 1 white, and then you have juniors and all those things. Which brings me nicely onto the issue of land reform. In South Africa, in the Western Cape, why is it so hard to get meaningful land reform and more black and brown farmers into that sector? What's the gridlock there?
Well, the one thing is government's focus and who they want to, which farmers they want to support, right? And 2, access to land, all right? Now, in the first instance, the national government, which the provincial government parrots, because it's a capitalist kind of, narrative, that we have to, they want to duplicate this whole BEE model on agriculture. In other words, they want to empower black farmers to partner in the boardroom with white farmers. So the white farmers can continue the farming while black farmers become the boardroom farmers. That's the one model that the government is pursuing. The second model the government is pursuing is that they want to develop a black elite farmer class. Right? I mean, let's face it, South Africa has become a class project, right? And the working class and the poor, 75% of the population, are living below the breadline.
So they're looking to co-opt farmers into the agricultural sector in the same way that capital has co-opted certain black entrepreneurs into that into commerce and industry and such.
Exactly. So that's the one way, right, to co-opt the political connected, right? So that, this capitalist machine can keep rolling on with the old white racist capitalist money, right, into the new South Africa. Is what happened with the BEE, right? The BEE didn't transform South Africa. It only transformed a few black people.
Yes.
Right? People working in these factories and those mines, their fate remained the same, like it was before apartheid, during apartheid. Then the other issue that is a problem in why land reform has failed is the whole issue of the beneficiary selection process. Right? Who gets to be selected for land reform farms, right? And so there's a lot of corruption involved, both on the side of the farmers who sell the land to the government, and there's huge kickbacks happening there between officials and the farmers who sell their land to the government for land reform. And then the officials and government who dish out this land to farmers, right? So the land is going to pals, the politically connected, buying votes, etc., etc., etc. And that's why one of the reasons why land reform has failed, because all the land is given to people who are not really farmers, right? So in this country, so what is the opposite of that? The opposite of that is that in this country there are over 200,000 small-scale commercial farmers.
What's the size of a small-scale commercial farmer?
Now, a small-scale farm would be a farmer and his family producing food for the family and selling surplus into the market. So there is household food security, but it also addresses local community food security.
Right.
Right. That's the definition of a small-scale farmer. A small-scale farmer farms on small land, depending on what he's farming. In our area, a small-scale farmer would look like me. I've got a hectare of land, right? And so I'm producing food for the house. I'm employing people, right? And I'm producing for the market.
Yes.
That's the definition of a small farmer. Where was I going with this? Okay, so
land reform and how it should work.
Yeah. So in our country, we have 200,000 small-scale commercial farmers, just like me, who are trying to carve out a livelihood for themselves without any government support. Because government's focus is on developing a rich farmer class. Right? Okay, that's where all the resources are going. The funding, the grant funding, all of that is going there. And then on the other hand, the country has over 2 million farmers, families who are growing food, who are called subsistence farmers.
Just to survive, they farm.
Just to survive. Now, it's very easy for the government to take some resources away from those rich farmers who can't farm and are not producing anything, and those land reform project has failed, to put in the hands of the 200,000 small commercial farmers and give them the right support for them to really flourish. And at the same time do that for the 2 million small subsistence farmers, for them to flourish, to grow enough food for themselves, for subsistence, but also to sell in the market.
Yeah.
So we're sitting in the country with a problem where we have a failed land reform program because it's focused in the wrong area with the wrong farmers.
Large-scale farmers who export, for the export market, effectively.
A lot of them are commodity farmers farming for the export. But there's also this question about how commercially viable these farmers are. The government doesn't want to release these statistics. But I can tell you, from the last 15 years I've been in the agricultural field, I have yet to see a successful, large-scale black commercial farmer who farms without the government grant.
But why is that? Is it simply because the system selects for people who are effectively not? There's no incentive or rather, the support doesn't exist for those farmers.
Because the grant is a disincentive to be profitable.
Right. So you
So
can
any
always.
idiot can become a farmer because his business model is based on free government money that you and I have to pay in our tax money. So that, he doesn't have to be a real business person running a profitable farm, because he doesn't need to do that.
And
he gets government
agriculture
grants.
is too strategic to fail. So it has to be bailed out regardless of the person not performing well.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's the wrong farmers getting the land and then the wrong support for them.
Right.
Right? The support is like a what I call a drip system. Like a patient
Yes.
it's on a drip system.
Yes.
That's what large-scale commercial farmers, most of them, not all of them, most of them, look like. They're patients in a hospital on a drip system of government grants.
Do smaller farmers face a threat from bigger farmers in terms of their land being bought up, or do they tend to fall prey to, let's say, companies who want to use the land for developments, or bigger farmers wanting to expand their land or their operations? What does that look like?
Dairy farms being bought out by monopolies?
Yeah. Well, I can only talk about in the horticultural space,
Yes.
right? I mean, there is this, we are losing actually our farmers are growing our food, potatoes, onions. We're losing them, right? I was at the nursery last week, and I couldn't even get chestnut trees because the nurseries who used to produce this stuff don't exist anymore, or in a state of disrepair, right? So we are losing our farmers. One, they're old. The average age of a white farmer is 62. And two, that we have a failed land reform program that are not encouraging new and young farmers to enter into the agricultural market, right? So there's no competition there, right? We need more farmers growing horticultural crops, potatoes, onions, spinach, etc., etc. And that's why it's so expensive, right? So it's not that we don't have the farmers are afraid of competition from other farmers. It's that people don't want to farm anymore. The white farmers don't want to farm anymore because their children don't want to farm, right? They at average age of 62. And the black farmers, who the government selects for land reform and agricultural projects, are the wrong farmers to farm our food, right? And like I pointed out to you, we have all this, small scale farmers who are ignored, right? So there's not a competition, but there's a huge need for farmers, and especially young and women farmers in our country. And the same reflects in our area, right? So in our area, we have 80% of the production by white male farmers.
In the PHA?
In the PHA, right? And so our project on the farm is we're upskilling unemployed farm workers who have been unemployed because farmers are mechanizing, making machines do the work, and upskilling them to become farmers. That's one of our projects, the campaign's project. So if you come to our farm, you'll see women farmers there, farming the land, growing crops, taking care of customers, selling the produce, etc., etc. Because that's the kind of need we have in our area. Because one of the big problems in our area is the long-term viability of our area is because one of the problems of the viability of our area is exactly that we don't have a succession plan to put in place to replace the white retiring farmers.
Right.
And this is what we're trying to do to protect it. What's the use of protecting the area when there are no farmers to farm it? So we are trying to fix that gap.
Right.
Well, there's the big 7 farmers in the PHA now. It used to be about 50 families that were farming in the area. But that's been whittled down to the 7 of the big farmers who are left. And basically what they do is they rent the land from neighboring farmers who don't want to farm anymore, and they have no vision of farming as something that a brown person can do. I mean, a lot of the antipathy towards the PHA campaign is race-based. So, in part, you have landowners who thought they were going to sell their land for a fortune to developers. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much gone now, because with stopping the developments on the western side, the U-West ones, that idea that your 250,000 rand per hectare is going to be 2.5 million per hectare is now fading away. So there's a lot of antipathy towards the PHA campaign for having stopped that prospect. But a great deal of the land is still owned by speculators who still think that the Oakland City development is going to go ahead. So there's a band of land around the Oakland City development which is owned by speculators, that the minute Oakland City gets approved, then all of those properties they're going to apply for that to be rezoned. And so you have what's called the shadow effect. If you approve 500 hectares of land, you're actually going to develop 1,000 hectares of land,
Right.
just by the shadow effect, because they also say that there's the administrative logic of the fact that you gave permission to one landowner, you can't say no to the one next door.
Yes.
It's just so what you end up doing is that you end up urbanizing a whole area just by approving the first development, and that's the scary thing. This illustration that's up is out of a provincial climate change policy document, which used the PHA as the case study for climate change resilience for the city of Cape Town. And guess who launched that with Alan Winde in 2017, and we were there.
Was it Anton Bredel?
Could it have been Anton Bredel?
Guys everywhere.
It was very, very nicely.
He launched that. So that's the sort of thing where you'll have an academic coming in and saying, but this provincial policy is amazing for climate change. Of course they'll preserve the PHA, but there is absolutely no rational link between the decisions that are made with regard to development and the policies that are behind it. So you actually have to then spend R1 million to go to a high court and get a judge to make that decision rather than the decision maker. There's some quite interesting comments about recycling that people are making.
Yeah,
let's
go do some comments. Our Chuck is a brewer. I'm not famous. My brother's much more famous than I. Recycling paper, glass, and even used motor oil is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Tell me if I am lying. Is he lying?
And if there's a province that would be able to implement recycling services, who would be able to implement recycling policies and turn it into multi-billion rand industries, it's the Western Cape. You know, it's hugely ironic.
I want to ask you, I went to R Labs and they have a program. Do you know about that program? Where they want to empower the guys that walk around and
The waste pickers.
Yeah, so they will empower them with giving them a scale and cash so that they can start their business. Do you guys know anything about that?
Well, it's already happening. I mean, I put our farmers' bins out. We have a plastic bin, 2 plastic bins, a glass bin, a metal bin, a food waste bin, which we actually make compost from. Every Thursday we put it out, and the waste pickers just collect it, and they go. That's their income. They go and sell it. So it's already happening. It's not somebody discovered this.
Yeah.
You know, it's already happening.
R Labs they're just empowering the guys that does
Yes.
it. Yeah, they explained a little bit when myself and Ryan was there. Very interesting.
I want to understand this comment. There are a few acronyms that I don't understand here. The global waste recycling services market was valued at an estimated $58 billion USD in 2022. The market is expected to grow considerably in the coming years as consumer awareness about the environmental impacts of waste increases. By 2032, the global waste recycling services market is forecast to surpass the value of $90 billion USD, registering a CAGR of 4.7% during the forecast period. What he's saying is that recycling is viable. Lucian Davis, the issue is that the backup plan of the city is not working for the working class. This was proven during the day zero we had in the city. I wrote an article in Umsebenzi online where 60% of the water was used by the elite in the city, and the use was not even for essential use, but rather for pools and other amenities. I'm going to meet with Lucian soon, tomorrow. This is a promising young leader. You're going to hear a lot more about this Lucian Davids guy, by the way. Is he right?
He's right. I also saw a research paper that points this out, that the biggest users under our water crisis was actually people in the southern suburbs using water for their pools and stuff, you know. But the issue about waste, right? I mean, I can't comment on the waste in the way that it's framed there, that it's a huge multi-billion rand business, right? But what I can say is that the city itself, through their waste management policy, states that the recycling, the opportunity to make money out of recycling has declined, right? For some reason or the other. Can't remember what of those reasons are. And that there are less and less material being recycled because it's economically viable to take that recycled material and, you know, and add value to it. But in the PHA, it's a different matter.
Because you can consolidate all of the recyclables materials, and then you can, at scale, it becomes viable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm an Atlantic Fellow for Racial Equity, right? And part of my project this year and next year would be to connect the city's urban waste to farm soils. So what's the problem? And this is another value of the PHA. So the problem is that the city is generating about 3 million tons of waste. The province, 3 million tons of waste. And all this waste is going to landfill. The city itself,
Food waste.
This is all kinds of waste.
Okay.
In the city's food waste, the food and biodegradable waste. Now, this is like food that people, you know, throw away in the bin because they finish eating. It's apple sculler, it's orange peels, you know, all that kind of waste. They throw it in the bin, right? Council comes, collects it, and goes to the dip. Right? It is right next door to us, yeah. What happens there? That tip is emitting 10% of the city's CO2 emissions because of that rotting food waste that's sitting in that, and it's not only food; it's also other waste, like your green waste. You know, you sweep your yard, you pick up the leaves, you throw it in the bin. You trim your shrub, you trim your tree. What do you do with that stuff? You throw it out, you throw it in the bin, and council picks it up. So, this waste, the food and biodegradable waste going to landfill, amounts to 1.5 million tons a year. Now, my proposal for the city is very simple, is that all that waste should come to the PHA. The council must put up a compost processing facility in the PHA and compost all that waste. And we farmers can use it to put in the soil where it sequesters carbon, right? And prevents climate change and prevents all these emissions going out into the atmosphere. That's the value of just the food and urban waste that can come, that can be dealt with.
It's also a saving for the city.
They do have a separate thing here in just opposite the cemetery.
Yes.
Where they separate they don't they take, I don't know where do they take that to? That would have
Well, the city has issued tenders for a couple of companies. So there are companies who are taking the food waste away, not the food waste. So they are, what you're seeing there is actually the green waste. So in Wynberg as well. So people bring the landscapers and garden services bring their stuff
I do
in
the
there.
same, yeah.
Then these tender, the people who hold the tender, they chip the material, and then that material they take into the yard and they make compost of it.
Okay.
But the problem there is that they are selling the compost on, right? So they get paid to perform that service for the
And
city,
they get money from it.
and they make
That's
a
nice.
profit on the compost that they're selling. Now the compost that they're selling is a problem for farmers like us, like me. I can't afford to buy that compost, right? You know, I'm old enough to remember that the council. I mean, this is probably before your guys' time. The council used to compost themselves. It was part of the council's job to compost material. Wynberg had a big composting site. So it's something that we need to bring back. That we need to use all our resources, and the food and biodegradable waste is a resource.
I just want to add that they do actually have, it's very small scale, but they do actually give the compost, the hourkie that you make it with,
Compost bins, yeah.
the bins, they give it for free. So there is an initiative that they're trying to, but it's a
Yes.
small, really, because that's what I do. I bought one and I got one for free from them.
Yes.
And it really, if you think about it, it takes a lot of space that you would have wasted. You know what
Yes.
I'm saying?
Yes.
So
No, that's a very good initiative of the city.
they're trying.
And it's not the only city has done that, right? And so, because the city understands that there's a problem for them, because not because of the economics of it, but because of the problem of landfills. And the landfills are running out of space.
This one is apparently 4 years and then it's full. The prediction, that's what they said at our labs.
Yeah.
So it looks quite scary actually.
Yeah, so the one thing is that the landfills are filling up fast, and they are eyesore, and they are like vectors of climate change. They emit all this greenhouse gases into the city. That's exacerbating our problem with climate change in the city.
Well, that's one of the uses of climate change funding that should be used. Is that if you could have a large scale project to remove all the food waste from the landfills and turn it into compost. The other positive outcome of that would be that you can convert more of the farmers who in the PHA farm with fertilizers and pesticides. If you had a large project which was producing compost at scale for the free use of farmers, then you could convert more of those farmers to regenerative farming practices. And those regenerative farming practices are much more water friendly and, of course, environmentally friendly. And the other benefit of regenerative farming practice is that you employ twice as many people per hectare because it's very much more manual. It's not automated. You use many more people per hectare. And one of the big things that COP has never addressed is the food system in the world, which is responsible for up to 50% of our climate change emissions. And nobody's talking about the food system. Nobody's talking about how our food is produced. And one of the things, Nazeer, we discovered that he was a regenerative farmer. There's a word for it. After he started farming a few years later.
Cape Led farmer.
City of Cape Town says you're a degenerate farmer.
There you go. But one of the things that is going to have to change in the near future is this approach where fertilizers and pesticides go hand in hand with farming. We can't afford that anymore. And there will come a time when there's too much fertilizer going into the aquifer, and we will have to change the farming methodology. The extent to which Zikofle and Rondafle are affected by those fertilizers, we don't know. You have these events that take place in your flays here, and the extent to which the water plumes from the PHA and the extent to which that is fertilizer laden.
Water
we
plumes,
don't know.
What is that? What's that?
So when you have an underground water system, you have ebbs and flows of water. One of the biggest discussions about the Consul sand mine is that if you allow them to put in a 30-meter deep sand mine, within 7 years, the water from that pool, from that pond is going to
The dirty water.
plume underground across to Rondaflay.
Okay.
And
And to
so-
Zikoflay.
Okay, so it creates
Right
its
next
own
door
sort of
to you,
channel
yeah.
effectively.
It does.
into-
So
okay.
there's water flows underground. It's just very much more slow than it would be if it was a lake over
Yeah.
on top of the ground. And so that is one of the biggest arguments that the water use license for Consul Mine was turned down, was because the original modelling, which showed what happens to the water in the aquifer, and what happens when you expose the water in that aquifer. What happens in the northern part of the PHA is that there are streams of the aquifer there that are particularly salinated. So they've got quite a lot of salt water in it, and the farmers in the northern areas struggle to find clear water to use. But what happens is that if you're on a farm where there's salinated water in the underground aquifer, then what you do is you use the water supply from the farm next door, and it works quite nicely. Now, if you take 50 hectares and turn that into a pond, you are going to put salt water into a great big pond, and you're going to have a great salt soup. And that salty soup is what's going to plume across to Rondaflay.
Right.
And Zikoflay.
And Zikoflay.
So,
The modeling shows that the council polluted water will move towards Zikoflay over 10 years. But the EIA was very interesting in how they framed it. They said, look, it's going to happen in 10 years, so don't worry about it.
Oh, okay.
I've been living here now for about 8 years, and there was 1 year where all the fish just started dying. And I'm wondering, isn't it because of that? Because there was no clear answer given. And I mean, it never happened again.
Yeah.
And then we have a muggy problem, and all the neighbors believe it comes from the water.
Yes.
But the city says something else. They always have a different thing. And I'm wondering even if it's not maybe that
Well, you know,
long-term
the
effects and
thing
stuff like
with,
that.
the thing with this aquifer, right? It covers 630 square kilometers in the city. You're on top of the aquifer. Rhonda flies on top of the aquifer. Princess flies on top of the aquifer. The Black River, the Salt River, the wetlands.
It's one of the
across
world's
the
largest
Cape
aquifers,
Flats.
isn't it? Yeah.
Zikoflay, the whole of Mitchell's Plain, the whole of Kailicha, all the Cape Flats towns, Manenberg, Hanover Park, Bonteheuvel, all the way up to the Tygerberg Hills, right? So it's a huge aquifer. And there is no walls and wards in this aquifer. Like this is Mackenzie's ward, right? Okay, only I'm the boss here, and this whatever happens doesn't affect you next door. No. Whatever happens on top of the aquifer impacts on the whole aquifer. So if somebody pollutes somewhere, say in Bonteheuvel, that water travels in the aquifer and pollutes the whole aquifer. And this is one of our biggest problems that we have. And we need to educate the whole city about the value of this aquifer and how we are deeply connected to it. And so we as a campaign are trying to do some minuscule work around it, because we know funding is always a problem. We have aqua festivals. You know, we had 2 already over the last couple of years, and we may have another one next year. And we're having activities around creating awareness around the aquifer, so that people can understand, you know, why it's important to protect
It's so interesting that you're mentioning this now, because this the city had with the 2 mouths that feeds the flay. They actually have like a barrier to keep the plastics out, and I'm like really good, because the first one just didn't last long, and in my mind I'm like, nah, they're doing a good job, but now I'm realizing that that's just the top level of that's the surface
Exactly.
level of a problem really, and we need a holistic approach to this thing, because that water you don't see.
Exactly, people.
Yes,
Exactly.
It comes
so-
to your food though. It's everywhere, but
Yeah.
it's invisible. That's the
So part of this industrial farming that Susanna was talking about is that that you have this algae bloom that robs the water of oxygen, and that is caused by fertilizers that farmers use. So when fish die, they die because there's no oxygen, right? And it's because the water is so polluted with fertilizer. It could be one part of the solution or the problem, and there could be many others, right? But I'm just talking as a farmer and knowing what happens.
I've noticed when the water is extremely green, and if you go out with a boat, you can see it's sluggish. You know what I'm saying? But I've discovered if we have a windy days, it almost like it brings it back to the brown, more healthier water type of vibe. So it's didn't know about this tonight.
So there are many contributing factors to polluting the aquifer, right? And industrial farming is one, right? But there are also, chemicals being used on the aquifer. I mean, you're flushing down, all kinds of chemicals down your toilet. You're passing, drugs through your body and urinating out into, there are so many different kind of, they're what the scientists call like chemicals of emerging chemicals of concern, right? And there are existing chemicals of concern. There are so many chemicals that are in our food, that we touch daily, in plastics, the production of plastics, all kinds of things, right? And that the waste of that is always a problem. And it manifests itself a lot in water, because water is in the soil. You dump it in the soil, you impact on the water.
Can I ask you something? I think you're the perfect person to know this. So about a year ago, I did some research on a thing called boron, or I don't know how you pronounce it. So in the States, boron is you need it. Males need it to create testosterone naturally. So you will get it in vegetables where grown in the ground. So with them, the sand isn't the growing soil isn't so fertile anymore.
Doesn't have the boron.
It doesn't have the boron anymore,
Yes.
so they need supplements. Now, my question is to you: do we still have the natural? How do we know? Is there studies to show? Okay, in 1950, the boron or whatever was this level? Do we know how this?
Bro, the reason why we are having this half of the chemists selling you supplements is because those things are not in the soil anymore. That's why
I thought that's happening in the States.
No, here too. No, here too. Because the way we are polluting the soil and the water is polluting, is degrading the soil so much that those minerals that are in the soil, like boron, that the plant picks up, is destroyed, right? And so what? We have a problem of male fertility. So now you have to get boron from the chemist, right? And I'll tell you what is the problem here, right? So there are many studies that have been done over the last 10 years. The first study I saw about 6-7 years ago was a study done over a period of 50 years, from 1945 to 1991, around about that period. I've got the study references and everything, where this scientist researched the nutrient content of what's in the food. Like you have a carrot, what's in the carrot? The carrot has iron, it has magnesium, it has polyphenols, it's all those antioxidants, all those things. That is your medicine, right? And the study discovered that over the last 50 years, the nutrient content of the food has dropped in some elements 50 to 70% in the vegetables and in our meats. Now, why? The only reasonable explanation is that the soil in which the food is grown and the feed that the animals are fed are lacking in those nutrients anymore because the soil is destroyed. And how is the soil destroyed? because for the last 100 years, since they discovered artificial chemical fertilizers, they've been growing food with this artificial chemical fertilizers that have given us the green revolution, a lot more food, but less nutrient-dense food, means less healthy food, and also it meant that it destroyed the environment, the water, the soil. I'll give you one example. Farmers use fertilizers in this industrial fertilizers. It's what they call conventional farming. There's nothing conventional about it, right? Okay, that's aberration farming, right? Farmers use fertilizers. Now, what does fertilizer do? It gives the plant nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, 3 key ingredients for plant growth. But the plant needs 40, 50 different nutrients for it to grow well. And those nutrients are destroyed by the fertilizer put in the soil to make the plant grow with those 3 nutrients. So what happens is the farmer puts down a kilogram of fertilizer to grow potatoes. Okay? The potato plant only picks up between 10 and 40% of that fertilizer, because that's all it needs. The farmer has no understanding of what the potato needs. It's not a science. It is a hit and miss story. This is research, eh? This is not coming from Nazeer, what they call me, a farmer?
Degenerate farmer.
Degenerate farmer, right? So, the plant is only able to pick up between 10 and 40% of those fertilizer nutrients, potassium, nitrogen, phosphorus, right? What happens to the rest? The plant don't need it. It doesn't want it. Where does it go? It destroys the soil. It goes into the groundwater, and it surfaces in zygoflay as that algae bloom that you're talking about, right? And this is what's happening. So across the world, there are literally dead zones, coastal zones of water and inland water bodies polluted, but that don't carry any life because it has been polluted by fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides. Now, the big case, of course, study is in the States, the kingdom of capitalism, right? So there you have the Gulf of Mexico, which has got no aquatic life. It's a dead zone.
Wow.
It's the world's biggest dead zone because the Mississippi runs through, I think, 4 or 5 states and picks up all the agricultural agrochemicals and washes it down the Mississippi into the Gulf of Mexico. And that's why it's the biggest dead zone on planet Earth. So yes, you're right. Your instincts is right. There's something wrong with the water. And I'm giving you one explanation of what it could be. But there could be many other
There are
things.
many factors that sort of, it's like chemistry, the different factors interface with each other and create numerous unintended consequences, all of them harmful, none of them beneficial. So let's say, for example, if there was an initiative to take all the food waste and compost it in the PHA, would that be a way of sort of recovering the soil and is it too late or?
No, it's never too late. No, of course, that's what we're doing on the farm. So when we started farming in 2015, the soil was very badly degraded. It was full of rubble, plastic, car parts, body parts, all kinds of stuff, right? So we had to actually clean that soil. Right?
Literally body parts. Oh, okay. Oh. Cool.
So we had to clean that soil.
By the way, in 1997 was the first time they drained the splay, and they've discovered a whole lot of bodies. So I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I know he was joking, but that actually happens.
Yeah, I was exaggerating a bit about the body parts. I mean, car body parts. Okay.
Right. Okay.
So the rehabilitation process of that is very clear. Is that you put in compost, you farm differently, and so the compost holds carbon. It holds all the major nutrients, potassium, nitrogen, phosphorus, and a lot of the micronutrients, 40, 50 other micronutrients that comes out of your food, right? So it's It's embedded in the food, right? So your food waste is not waste; it's actually nutrients in there. So that get composted, then it gets a new lease of life, and then that goes into the soil, and that builds your soil health without using chemicals. And as your soil health builds, the food coming out of that soil is now healthier with more nutrients in them. Right?
One of the fascinating experiences is if you eat carrots or beans or whatever comes off Nazeer's farm, you eat those vegetables. Well, from the minute it's harvested, you can smell it already. But when you eat those vegetables, you suddenly realize that those vegetables taste like the vegetables you used to taste as a child. And so all those micronutrients are turn into the nutrients that are in the food. So Nazeer sells his vegetables off the farm from 8 to 5, Monday to Friday. And people with immune system disorders and that sort of thing who shouldn't be consuming trace elements of fertilizer and pesticides from commercially produced food. It's a great source of that sort of food, and
it's very interesting, right? I've got people coming, from some of them from Zikufle. The doctor advised them they must eat organic food.
Well, look, we're gonna take a trip.
number.
Yeah, we're gonna take a trip there, and a couple
Definitely.
of trips, and to look and to buy. I've got these are all great ideas, but we have to get the shocking thing for me about this interaction is the collusion between the political class, between the capitalist class, between people who have the incentive to just destroy the food security and the goodness of foods. We need to get rid of these people, basically. We need to, Anton Bredal, we need to change
They are weeds,
Anton
bro. You know what you do
Bredal.
with weeds? We put them in compost. We turn them into better people.
So, I mean, where to next for the PHA campaign, and how can people support you?
well, we've got this outstanding decision that Anton Bredal is going to make. He's probably going to approve the Oakland City development again. And we're going to need to take that to court in the coming year. So, what's really difficult about the PHA campaign is that we keep having these newspaper articles to say we've had a victory, we've had a victory, we've had a victory. But it's because there are 6, 7, 8 different developers and mines that are trying to proceed in the PHA. And so, whenever you just say to the average Joe Soap in Cape Town, we need some help with the PHA campaign, they'll say, oh, but we thought you'd won that. But it's an ongoing battle, is that as soon as you win one thing, then the next application goes in. So take us seriously when we say where your food comes from matters. And when we need support, especially when it comes to the court case that is invariably going to happen next year, then Cape Town is really good at coming to the party when it's required, and we always need a little bit of money for specialist reports and that sort of thing. But we did manage to go to court with nothing before, but it's not really fair to the lawyers to get them to expect them to just carry on and on and on. So when you do see a crowdfunding campaign that says save the PHA, I hope the last 2 hours have given you an idea of why it's worth saving. And we can go back to that. We'll try our best to remind you of the key points of why the PHA is worth saving. But I'm a suburbanite. I live in Kenilworth. The reason why I volunteer for the PHA campaign is because food is life, and we all need food, and we all have the right to the resources that produce that food. And you have just as much a right to those resources as I have, as have regenerative farmers like Nazeer to produce that food for you, and we'd like to keep it that way.
Yeah, I'm gonna look into these consultants. I want to do what I can. These guys, these consultants and these politicos, they are. Let me not say.
Well,
Nazir?
I want to say that there are a few things that people can do. One, they should visit the PHA. People should visit. I mean, I'm hoping you will put my number down and the campaign's Facebook page and the farmers' Facebook website. People can look into it. I don't know if we send it to you, but we'll do that. So just to visit the PHA, because people think they know the PHA because they're living Manenberg, they live in Grassy Park, or they live in Mitchell's Plain because they drive through the area. They haven't seen nothing of the area, right? So that's the one thing. Come visit. We arrange organized tours. That part of these tours are that we invite groups to come, and then get a presentation from the campaign about all these issues that we're talking about: the water, the food, the pollution, the compost, the why farming has to change, etc. Right? Because for me, it's important to educate people about where your food comes from and why is it important. Right? So that's the one thing. Then the other thing is when we have activities. So we are planning a huge activity in January next year. We want to launch an aquifer protection campaign, because we need long-term protection, like Susanna says. But we're not getting it from Berdel, nor the new incumbents in the city, right? Mr. Andrews and Mr. Meyer,
Jordan L. Lewis,
Mr. Lewis, etc., etc.
Ivan Meyer.
No, so they're not really interested. So we wanted to make it so that this whole city shouts at them and demands that their food and their water is protected in the PHA. And that's what we want to launch next year, right? And so we would like people to come and support us, do that. And remember, we're not into toying and building, burning down buildings. We have a different way of doing it in our democracy. There are many other innovative ways that we do our work. Then the other thing would be, when you come to the PHA, support small farmers. Because small farmers are the future of the big farmers. So if you support small farmers, then you're supporting your food supply and the growth of farmers that we desperately need. And then the other thing that is practical for us, for the whole city and those of your viewers, is to think about water in their area, not as stormwater or as a problem of flooding, but as an opportunity to harvest that water to recharge the aquifer. Here in Zikoflei, you have a stormwater system. Where does the stormwater go to? When it rains, that water don't go into the soil and replenishes the aquifer that you're also part of here with our aquifer in the PHA. It's all one aquifer. That water goes into the sea. So we need to figure out in all our neighborhoods, how can we keep as much water from running down the roof and holding it into the soil? So create little ponds around the house so the water can flood those ponds and then the overflow can go in the drain. But try to keep some water into your space, and so it can sink into the soil and recharge the aquifer. Because we all can do that. You see, we can all do that, right? We just need to keep as much water in the system to hydrate the aquifer, and then we will protect the aquifer.
Right. So stormwater doesn't recharge the aquifer; it runs elsewhere. Where's the water that goes into your garden or your space, wherever, that will eventually filter down into
the aquifer. You see?
Excellent.
Because you see, this whole stormwater system was designed by a couple of white O's from England who came here with the Jan van Riebeeck. No, actually, it was Dutch O's. With Jan van Riebeeck.
Blame them both.
They were so disconnected to this Kamisa, our water, that they paved over this water, right? And they continue to pave it over today. So we have to think differently. We have to think about water as not only as life, but as essential for everything, right? And how can we then each one of us do our part in protecting this water? It's not only Nazeer's job, it's not in Berdel's job, and they're doing a bad job of it. Nazeer is doing a bad job of it. it's also all of our responsibility to take care of this water. And that's how we're gonna save this aquifer and make us climate resilient in the future.
Nazeer, thank you very much. Susanna, thank you very much. I promised to have this conversation a long time ago, so I'm glad we did it. And I think we're going to have many follow-up discussions. And if there's anything that we can do to assist, let us know. We're here. So,
Lovely.
Cool.
Thank you, Roscoe.
Pleasure.
It's been great being here. Nice
Thanks,
seeing you again.
Roscoe.
Yeah, nice to see
I almost didn't recognize you with all that hair that you lost.
Listen, I'm going for that Gillette sponsorship. I can also be the guy on TV that goes, what about redness? I want to be that guy. Thank you for joining us. Next week, we're back. And like our YouTube page, like our Facebook page, subscribe, do all those things that helps us to spread the word. Nobody else covers stuff like this. Like literally nobody else. And it's so important that we get knowledgeable about these things. So join us next Monday. We'll see you then. Nantal, thank you very much. And we out.